Welcome back, Canonites. This past week saw the release of a new Ask 343 video, the series, which will follow each new Inside Infinite blog. Going forward, I plan to cover these in detail, starting today with the episode that focused on Zeta Halo itself, for the most part. The episode was, like most Infinite news, a mixed bag, with some answers that sound really cool and others that left many fans infuriated or scratching their heads. So, let's dive in. To start, for those unfamiliar with this video series, these Q&A sessions are led by Community Manager John Unishek and feature members of the development team answering questions from the community. This episode featured lead sandbox designer Quinn Del Hoyo, lead world designer John Mulkey, gameplay director Troy Mashburn, and campaign art lead Justin Dinges. Over the 40+ minutes of video, these four answer a variety of questions. To make things easy, I've broken their answers down into essentially the good and the bad, more or less. So let's get the more troubling stuff tackled first. As I'm sure many have heard by now, both Dual Wielding and Playable Elites are confirmed to not be returning at launch. Now, keep that "at launch" part in mind, we'll come back to that. Dual Wielding hasn't been a part of the franchise since Halo Reach removed the feature in 2010, so I don't think it should come as a surprise that it won't be returning here. This is one of the facts that I'm middling on personally. Dual wielding was never a favored feature for me, and the way it was implemented resulted in the overall Halo sandbox suffering, with many weapons being made next to useless unless they were dual wielded. That said, I think it would be cool if 343 could at least give the option to turn on dual wielding for custom games sometime down the line. And for shits and giggles, maybe allow us to select a degree of dual wielding ability, like you could have things set up for a more classic dual-wielding experience, or go as far as allowing every weapon to be dual-wieldable. 343? Give me dual sniper rifles. I don't care how stupid it is, I want to do it. Options are optional, and I'd love to see that sort of option implemented. Alternatively, maybe they could go the Call of Duty route, and make it so that when you pick up a dual-wieldable weapon, you just automatically pick them up as a pair. No dropping the secondary gun, no mixing and matching weapons, just pick up a pair of the same weapon and run. But now, let's talk about Elites. Yes, they once again will not be returning at launch. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, though that doesn't mean it shouldn't hurt. I completely sympathize with the Elite community. What was perhaps worse, though, was the reason given for this decision.
You know, this is a Master Chief story and a Spartan story, especially in multiplayer. We want to make sure that we focus on how Spartans battle against each other and that it feels fair and it's competitive, it's balanced.
And you can imagine how people took this. It's bad reasoning, no two ways about it. Halo games have always been a Spartan story, but that didn't stop Playable Elites from being included in previous games. As for the multiplayer side, the mention of focusing on making a competitive experience is probably the opposite of what fans wanted to hear, and just raises so many questions. Why are we focusing so much on competitive again after what happened with Halo 5? Halo 5 is a ton of fun for a lot of people, but the competitive focus in its design is very noticeable to many others, myself included. If Elites are such an issue in competitive, why not just lock them out of ranked playlists like Halo Reach did? I think there are acceptable reasons for cutting Elites out of multiplayer experiences, but this answer was not that. This really should have been something left for a blog post, or there should have been a more detailed, prepared answer rather than something off the cuffs. Now, one thing that fans can latch onto is that this answer just pertains to Elites being present at launch. Halo Infinite is a 10-year platform, so it's always possible that Elites could be added to multiplayer down the line. Elite players have made their passion clear since the launch of Halo 4, and I hope that 343 will finally respond to that sometime during Infinite's life cycle. Now, moving on, when the devs were asked about dynamic weather, they basically said that no, there won't be dynamic weather. Specifically, they noted things like rain, thunder, and snowstorms, but also said there will be like fog systems, visible changes in the wind, and the like. Now, this is more of a mixed bag than purely bad news. From a lore perspective, Halo rings are heavily controlled environments, so there wouldn't be sudden weather changes or weather that might threaten the wildlife. Hopefully, there is some kind of weather beyond just wind and fog like we see in the E3 2018 trailer. This is something that 343 could definitely stand to flesh out down the line. And on the subject of wildlife, it was noted that there will not be hostile wildlife, which is a major disappointment for myself and others. Like with the answer for Playable Elites, I found that the explanation for why there won't be hostile wildlife to be rather odd, let's say. To sum things up, John Mulkey explains that they didn't want to distract from the Banished and UNSC conflict. Surely, though, there must be ways to make wildlife react hostily to both UNSC and Banished presence, or react with hostility if shot at or something. It'd be another layer to really bring this ring to life, and I think it's a big missed opportunity. However, though, that wraps up the truly negative stuff and brings us to some more middling and, in some cases, exciting news. Starting things off, while hostile wildlife is out, Mr. Mulkey went on to explain that wildlife would be used to alert players to certain locations, such as birds flying above a banished base or something. Personally, I'd love to see something like a stampede being triggered by the banished and drawing attention to their activity like that. Further still, when asked about how the ring would change during the night, it was noted that certain forms of life are bioluminescent, something we actually got to see on those alien deers in Halo Infinite's announcement trailer. I'll be eager to see what else might appear at night. And on the subject of nighttime, it was also noted that encounters would change by night versus by day. We'd get stuff we'd expect like phantom patrols and sleeping grunts a la Halo Reach, but they also talked about taking advantage of the night to use different lighting effects and make things stand out in different ways. A notable example would be the Jackal Shield, which would definitely stand out against the darkness. In addition, the time of day will be reflected in cutscenes. Like all Halo FPSs, Infinite uses in-engine cutscenes, so the time of day will be reflected when you enter a cutscene. Further too, the weapons and equipment you have should show up on your character model, a feature that we saw all the way back in Halo 2, and pretty much just there. This is all part of 343's goal to make a seamless transition between gameplay and cutscene, something we saw demonstrated directly in the July 2020 demo. Now, let's dive into some of the questions and answers surrounding the basic design of the game. A big topic of discussion was how diverse the biomes of Zeta Halo would be, or in other words, how varied the environments will be. Now, the initial answer was to say that everything on Zeta Halo is derivative of the Pacific Northwest area where 343 is based, and where they drew their primary inspiration from, with various sub-biomes as they describe them. Understandably, several fans interpreted this to mean that it would basically be derivative of these mountainous Greenlands that we see in a lot of the concept art and trailers. However, a quick search of the Pacific Northwest environment reveals that there's quite a variety of locations. So, anyone disappointed with the answer or wondering if the E3 2018 trailer was deceptive, rest assured. 343 was asked about whether the game is open world or semi-open world, and they kind of avoided giving a direct answer, probably to avoid setting the wrong expectations. They did note, though, that the freedom of choice found in the level of Silent Cartographer, where you can kind of choose whichever direction you want to go and how you want to approach things, was the primary inspiration for Infinite. As a dev puts it later on,
so much of this game is anchored in the idea of player agency and choice,
Although the game does sound like it will be open world to a degree, with new areas unlocking as you progress, and 343 working to keep players from sequence breaking, to skip ahead of the story, via the narrative itself rather than soft barriers or invisible walls, though we do know some of that stuff will return. And in between those main missions, there will be places for players to veer off the golden path, as 343 puts it. Maybe you'll find a squad of Marines that needs saving, or maybe you'll come across an audio log, and yes, audio logs were directly mentioned in the latest video, so that's confirmed, and I'm very happy about that. The game also has systems in place that can build random encounters between main objectives based on how the player is traversing the ring. Not in a manner that punishes the player or anything, but crafting experiences that are more fun. Like if you're approaching in a Banshee or a Warthog, the game will spawn in different enemies and whatnot that are more fun to engage depending on what vehicle you have, or if you're on foot. And swinging back to the idea of player choice, one of the best moments of the video was when Troy Mashburn talked about how he had accidentally managed to shove a Wraith off the edge of the Halo ring. So for anyone who was curious about that, yes, you can shove enemies over the edge. Now, wrapping things up, let's just rapid fire a few things that were confirmed in this latest video. In multiplayer, you'll only be able to hold one piece of equipment at a time, but 343 is working on custom games options where players can select how many pieces of equipment a player can hold. The ring is a fully rendered 3D model, not just a skybox painting, and you won't be able to upgrade weapons in campaign, but it sounds like you can unlock weapon variations, and you can at the very least upgrade your equipment. And that basically wraps up this latest Halo Infinite news drop. There is plenty to be excited about. As far as a gameplay experience, Infinite sounds like it's going to be great overall. However, the news was not all good. So what did you think of this latest news drop? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, this has been Halo Canon. Special thanks to our theoretical patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or get a direct shout-out, check out patreon.com/halocanon. You can simply support the channel or get additional benefits, such as behind-the-scenes materials and shout-outs like this. However, your continued viewership is more than enough for me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. If you really enjoy this, turn on that notification bell so you can be among the first to see new videos when they release. But for all my fellow Canonites, keep on being awesome.